Greetings, Commanders, Cerebrats, and Executors. In this episode, we will be talking about all the different units the Protoss race have available. The Probe is a small unit with 20 health, 20 shields, and no armor. It's a hovering unit. Probes have an attack which does 5 damage per hit and cannot be upgraded. It costs 50 minerals and 1 supply to build a probe, and they are built from the Nexus. Probes are the Protoss worker unit. They harvest minerals and gas and do all Protoss building construction. The Zealot is a small ground unit with 100 health, 60 shields, and 1 armor. Zealots attack in melee, hitting the target twice. Each hit does 8 damage for a total of 16 damage each time the Zealot attacks, which is what you see here. Each hit gains +1 damage per upgrade, but armor on enemy targets is also applied separately to each of those 2 hits. Zealots cost 100 minerals and 2 supply to build and are built from the gateway. Zealot movement speed can be upgraded from the Citadel of Adun. Zealots are a core part of most Protoss armies. They have good health and damage and are cheap and available immediately. They remain useful through the early game, mid game, and often in the late game too. The Dragoon is a large ground unit with 100 health, 80 shields, and 1 armor. Dragoons deal 20 explosive damage per shot, +2 per upgrade, and can attack ground or air. It costs 125 minerals, 50 gas, and 2 supply to build a Dragoon. They are built from the gateway, but you have to own a cybernetics core as well in order to build one. The cybernetics core contains an upgrade which increases Dragoon attack range. Dragoons are famous for being among the stupidest units in StarCraft. Unless controlled very precisely, they often attack the wrong target or walk in the wrong direction. However, Dragoons are available early, have a lot of health with the normal Protoss regenerating shield on top, move reasonably quickly, and have a good attack range once upgraded. This means that a player who knows how to control Dragoons can extract immense value from them, particularly early in the game. Dragoons are often the core of early Protoss vs Terran and Protoss vs Protoss fights for this reason. The High Templar is a small ground unit with 40 health, 40 shields, and 0 armor. High Templar are built for their special abilities. They have no attack. A High Templar costs 50 minerals, 150 gas, and 2 supply to build from the gateway. Although they're built from a gateway, they require a Templar Archives. The Templar Archives contains upgrades for the High Templar. High Templar have 2 abilities which cost them energy, both of which have to be researched from the Templar Archives before they can be used. Psystorm costs 75 energy to use. It is targeted in a specific place, then the Templar summons a lightning storm at the targeted location, which lasts about 3 seconds. The storm deals damage quickly to everything under it, adding up to 112 damage total for units that stay within it for the whole duration. Psystorm hits both ground and air units, friend and enemy units, but does no damage to buildings. Importantly, if multiple Psystorms are cast on the same position, the damage does not stack. Wait until the current Psystorm is finished before casting another on the same place. Hallucination costs 100 energy. The ability is targeted on a nearby unit and creates 2 duplicates of the targeted unit. Hallucinations deal no damage, though they still have attack animations, and have the same health and shields as the original unit, but take twice as much damage from enemy attacks, so hallucinations die quickly. Hallucinations only last a limited time, about 56 seconds, even if they aren't killed. Hallucinations will vanish immediately if hit by most special abilities. To the player who owns them, hallucinations appear blue-tinted, so you can tell the difference between them and real units. But to enemies they appear like normal units, unless within range of enemy detectors which reveal their blue-tinted appearance. High Templar also have the ability to morph into Archons. It takes 2 High Templar to create 1 Archon. To do this, select 2 or more High Templar and press the Archon Warp button. The High Templar move towards each other, and if they meet, they'll spend several seconds forming an Archon. If you use the Archon Morph command with more than 2 High Templar selected, the Templar will pair up to create more Archons. High Templar are generally most used for their Psi Storm ability, which deals heavy damage in one area, and is extremely useful against large, swarmy enemy armies, like Zerglings and Hydralisks. Hallucination is mainly only used as a decoy or distraction, since the hallucinations do no damage and are destroyed quickly. Once the High Templar have used up their energy, if there'll be more battles in the near future, it's often best to morph them into Archons to add more damage to your army. The Archon is a large ground unit with 10 health and 350 shields, and 0 armor. Archons are hovering units. Archons are formed by fusing 2 High Templar together. This means each Archon has an effective cost of 100 minerals, 300 gas, and 4 supply, although you can't build them from production structures. Archons deal 30 normal damage per attack with plus 3 damage per upgrade. Their attack also does decreasing damage in an area around the target point, and they can attack ground or air. This makes them good at clearing out units with small sizes like Zerglings, or air units which can be clustered close together like Mutalisks or Scourge. Archons are mainly built when High Templar have used up all their energy on abilities, although they are sometimes built to fill specific roles in Protoss vs. Protoss and Protoss vs. Zerg. The Archon's attack is ranged, but it's quite short range and you can't upgrade the range, so Archons struggle heavily against long-range enemies. Almost all of the Archon's durability is in shields, not health. This might sound like Archons can regenerate all the damage they take between fights, but shield regeneration often isn't fast enough to get an Archon back up to full health in between fights. And because shields take full damage from every damage type, the Archon's durability being made of shields often results in it dying faster than you might expect. It also means that armor upgrades provide almost no benefit to Archons, but shield upgrades do provide a bit more benefit than normal.
I'm waiting.
Dark Templar are small ground units with 40 shields, 80 health, and 1 armor. They do 40 damage per hit against ground targets, gaining 3 more damage with each upgrade. Building a Dark Templar costs 125 minerals, 100 gas, and 2 supply. Dark Templar are built from the gateway, but you have to own a Templar Archives to make them. Dark Templar are permanently cloaked. You don't need to research an upgrade for this, they are always invisible from the time you build them, and because they can also attack, they force the enemy to get some kind of detection. Dark Templar can morph into a Dark Archon. Select 2 or more Dark Templar, and press the Dark Archon Meld button. The 2 Dark Templar will move towards each other and fuse to create 1 new Dark Archon, taking a few seconds to complete the morph. If you issue the command with more than 2 Dark Templars selected, they'll pair up and each pair will make 1 new Dark Archon. The Dark Archon is a large hovering ground unit with 200 shields, 25 health, and 1 armor. Dark Archons are spellcasters. They have an energy bar and several abilities, but don't have an attack. Dark Archons start with the ability Feedback available, and you can upgrade them with the abilities Maelstrom and Mind Control from the Templar Archives, as well as upgrading their maximum energy. A Dark Archon is made by sacrificing a pair of Dark Templar, so although you don't build them directly, they effectively have a cost of 250 minerals, 200 gas, and 4 supply. Like the Archon, Dark Archons have most of their durability in their shields, meaning that armor upgrades don't help them much and they tend to take a lot of damage quickly. The ability Feedback costs 50 energy to cast and is targeted on an enemy unit which has an energy bar. It sets the target unit's energy to 0 and deals damage to the target equal to the amount of energy removed. This is a good anti-spellcaster ability. Since many spellcasters in StarCraft have relatively little health, you can often kill them in a single cast of Feedback, even if they're on full health, just because they'll have more energy than their total health bar. In particular, Feedback may be very valuable against enemy High Templar and Defilers. Maelstrom costs 100 energy to cast and can be targeted anywhere. All the biological units in a small radius around the target point are frozen in place, unable to move, attack, or use abilities for about 7 seconds. Units frozen by Maelstrom can still be attacked, even though they cannot attack. Maelstrom is primarily useful against Zerg, since all of their units are biological. It's especially good against tightly stacked flying units like Mutalisks. Mind Control costs 150 energy to cast, and removes all the Dark Archon's shields when you cast it in addition to the energy cost. It can be targeted on any enemy or ally unit. When Mind Control is cast, the targeted unit becomes the property of the player who owns the casting Dark Archon. All unit-specific upgrades, such as movement speed, attack range, or ability upgrades, which the old owner of the unit had researched, are also given to the player who mind-controlled that unit for free. In theory, mind control can be used to deprive the enemy of powerful units and gain them for yourself, but in practice the valuable enemy units are usually surrounded by powerful enemy armies, and casting mind control loses the Dark Archon all of its shields, so it's difficult to get either the Dark Archon or the mind controlled target out alive after casting mind control. If you mind control a transport containing other units, all the units inside also become yours. If you mind control a Terran or Zerg worker unit, you can use that worker to build a command center or hatchery, and then to build more workers, and then build the whole tech tree of the other races in the game. Dark Archon mind control is the only way you can play as multiple races in a normal game of StarCraft. However, it requires so much time and so many resources to build up the other races' tech trees that even if you manage to do it, if you have enough time and resources to accomplish that, then you are probably going to win the game anyway. Dark Archons don't get used very much in high-level StarCraft play. When they do get used, it's for feedback and Maelstrom, not for mind control. Their abilities have a lot of potential, but they're only useful in some very specific circumstances, and it's often easier to just use the money to build more combat units and try to fight the enemy in the normal way. The Shuttle is a large air unit with 80 health, 60 shields, and 1 armor. The Shuttle is the Protoss transport unit. It has no attack, but can pick up ground units and fly them to other locations and then unload them. Shuttles are built from the robotics facility, and they cost 200 minerals and 2 supply. Their movement speed can be upgraded from the robotics support bay. Once you've gotten this upgrade, shuttles are the fastest transport unit in the game. However, they're also the least durable transport unit in the game. The Observer is a small air unit with 40 health, 20 shields, and 0 armor. Observers are permanently cloaked without requiring an upgrade, and they are also detectors. They have no attack. Observers cost 25 minerals, 75 gas, and 1 supply to build. They're built from the robotics facility, but an observatory is required in order to build them. The movement speed and sight range of an observer can be upgraded from the observatory. Observers are the only form of mobile detection the Protoss have, so they are needed in most games. Because they're also cloaked, observers are useful for going into enemy bases and learning what the enemy is doing. You can often send them to watch the enemy, since their cloaking makes them less likely to be shot down. However, once the enemy does have detection, observers have very little health and can be killed very quickly if detected. Reavers are large ground units with 100 health, 80 shields, and 0 armor. Reavers attack by firing small exploding units called scarabs at enemy ground targets. Each scarab must be individually built by the Reaver and costs 15 minerals to build. An ordinary Reaver can only hold up to 5 scarabs at a time. It needs to fire some of the scarabs before you can build more. Each scarab fired deals 100 normal damage to the main target and deals reduced damage in an area of effect around the main target. Reavers are built from the robotics facility, but you must own a robotics support bay in order to build a Reaver. It costs 200 minerals, 100 gas, and 4 supply to build a Reaver. The robotics support bay also contains Reaver-specific upgrades. Reavers can be upgraded to hold up to 10 scarabs instead of 5, and to do 125 damage per scarab shot instead of 100. Reavers move very slowly along the ground, so shuttles can be helpful to transport them around faster. Because each shot from a Reaver costs 15 minerals, it's important to make them count. Often destroying a building with Reavers costs almost as many minerals as the building originally cost to build. However, Reavers have more range than most static defense buildings, so they can be useful for breaking enemy defensive positions efficiently. Their damage output is so high that most enemy ground units will die in 1 or 2 scarab shots, as long as they suffer direct hits. The Scout is a large air unit with 150 health, 100 shields, and no armor. Scouts have 2 weapons. The first deals 8 normal damage per shot versus ground targets, gaining 1 more damage per upgrade. The second weapon deals 2 volleys of 14 explosive damage each to air units for 28 damage total, and it gains 1 damage to each volley per upgrade for +2 damage to the total per upgrade. Enemy armor also applies to both of those missiles in that volley separately. Scouts can have their movement speed and vision range upgraded from the fleet beacon. Scouts are built from the Stargate, and they cost 275 minerals, 125 gas, and 3 supply. Scouts are available right away when you build a Stargate, and are surprisingly versatile, being able to attack both ground and air. However, they are very rarely built in high-level games because their cost is so high compared to their combat value. They start off slow-moving for air units, it requires an upgrade to improve that, and their upgrades come from the Fleet Beacon, which is a very expensive building in its own right. You have to sink an incredible amount of resources into just getting Scouts up to being decent. The Corsair is a medium air unit with 100 health, 80 shields, and 1 armor. Their attack deals 5 explosive damage to air targets, with extra damage done in an area of effect around the main target, and the attack gains +1 point of damage per upgrade. Corsairs are built from the Stargate, and cost 150 minerals, 100 gas, and 2 supply. Corsairs have an energy bar, and can be upgraded to use the special ability Disruption Web from the Fleet Beacon. You can also upgrade their maximum energy storage. Disruption Web costs 125 energy to use. It's targeted on the ground, creating a small web of energy, which lasts 15 seconds. All ground units under the Disruption Web cannot attack while it lasts. Corsairs are primarily used for controlling the skies and some scouting, taking advantage of their ability to fly. The Corsair's fast-firing area of effect weapon is effective at clearing through tightly stacked low-armor air units like Mutilisks and Scourge. The Disruption Web ability is theoretically good against enemy defensive positions to prevent them dealing damage while your army attacks in. But researching the ability in the first place is expensive, since it comes from the Fleet Beacon, and Disruption Web's duration is short enough that it's hard to cast several of them and launch a major attack before the webs expire. Zealots also don't work well with Disruption Web, since they almost always end up under it while trying to attack the enemy in melee, and then the Disruption Web prevents the Zealots from attacking as well as preventing your enemies from attacking. Carriers are large air units with 150 shields, 300 health, and 4 armor. Carriers do not attack their targets directly. Instead, each carrier can house a number of interceptors, small flying attack drones which fly back and forth around enemies and shoot lasers at them. Interceptors must be built individually for each carrier. One interceptor costs 25 minerals to build, and an interceptor has 40 shields, 40 health, 0 armor, and deals 6 damage per shot with +1 damage per upgrade. Unlike scarabs fired by Reavers, interceptors are not used up when sent to attack enemies. If possible, an interceptor will attack an enemy unit until it dies and then return to its parent carrier. However, With enough firepower, enemies can destroy interceptors as they fly around, forcing you to build more and more to keep the carrier at maximum capacity. Initially, each carrier can hold up to 4 interceptors at a time, but that limit can be increased to 8 with an upgrade from the fleet beacon. This upgrade should always be researched if you intend to use carriers. The carrier itself costs 350 minerals, 250 gas, 6 supply, and is built from the Stargate, but requires a fleet beacon. Carriers are extremely expensive, but potentially extremely powerful. They cost a lot of resources and time to build, but then cost more resources and time to fill up with interceptors once the carrier itself is finished. However, the number and long-distance nature of interceptors means that carriers can muster high damage output at long range once fully prepared. Carriers have 4 armor before any upgrades, which is very high, but the use of many low-damage interceptors to attack enemies means that carriers themselves are not very good at penetrating high armor enemy targets. You'll need to maintain a mineral income while your carriers are fighting an enemy army, as interceptors will be constantly shot down and need to be replaced. The Arbiter is a large air unit with 150 shields, 200 health, and 1 armor. The Arbiter has an attack which does 10 explosive damage per shot to ground and air targets with +1 damage per upgrade, but this attack fires at a very slow rate. Arbiters mainly rely on their special abilities to be valuable. Arbiters are built from the Stargate, although they require an Arbiter Tribunal in order to be built, and cost 100 minerals, 350 gas, and 4 supply. The Arbiter Tribunal also researches upgrades for the Arbiter, including unlocking its 2 special abilities, and upgrading its maximum energy. Arbiters always project a small cloaking field around themselves. All friendly units which get close to the Arbiter are cloaked as long as they remain close by. The main exception to this is that Arbiters cannot cloak other Arbiters. A Protoss army with a few Arbiters supporting becomes much harder to fight because the enemy needs to maintain some detection nearby the whole time. The Stasis special ability costs 100 energy to use. It is targeted on the ground somewhere near the Arbiter, and all units in a small radius around the target are frozen for 44 seconds. Frozen units are unable to move, attack, be attacked, use special abilities, or be interacted with in any other way. Stasis is useful for splitting up a large enemy army and fighting only part of it at a time. It can also be used to block narrow pathways for a long time by stasising enemy units, or even your own units, in those small gaps where units have to walk through. Stasis units can't be destroyed, and there's no way to remove the stasis early, but they still take up physical space on the map, and other units won't be able to get past a stasis unit through a narrow entrance. The Recall ability costs 150 energy. Target it in the middle of a group of your own units anywhere on the map, and they will be teleported to the location of the Arbiter. Recall is useful for attacking enemy bases in awkward positions, or behind defensive lines that the Arbiter can sneak around. If you can get an Arbiter into an enemy base from an unexpected angle, you can use Recall to teleport a small army into that location. Recall only teleports your own units, not your allies' units, and there is a limit as to how many units a single cast of Recall can teleport. Arbiters are very expensive. Their abilities can be potentially very powerful, but achieving that value is important to justify their cost. Arbiters have unusually high health for a spellcaster, which helps keep them alive long enough to use their abilities more. That is all of the units that the Protoss have access to.